Hello, my name is Paranormal, and today I have found 5 encounters people have had with the unknown existences of this world, and I will be retelling them here. I do hope you enjoy. The first story has been posted by user 21. There was nothing special about the evening I'm going to share with everyone. I live in these old apartments built in the 60s, but I feel like they were built before that. I went to sleep as I normally would, and my significant other at the time slept next to me. I was closest to the wall. From where I lay in bed, if I get woken up, I can look straight through my closet and into the bathroom and see the mirror in there. I was awakened, and I wasn't sure why. I scanned the room and I didn't see anything in my direct line of sight. My eyes adjusted a bit better, and that's when I looked towards the bathroom, which should have been a straight shot to the mirror. However, there was something there, in the way of the mirror. That's when it occurred to me that I was looking at a shadowy, extremely tall, basically as big and wide as the door it was standing in. A tall man with a heavy trench coat, heavy-duty steel-toed boots, and then a wide-brimmed hat. No other features were made out. It looked as though this man was watching us sleep. Instantly thinking it's an intruder, I shook my significant other awake slowly and quietly, and the best I could do without making sudden or obvious movements. They saw what I was shaking them for immediately and squeezed my leg. I was so scared, I thought, surely this is where I die. I looked closely at this man, and he didn't seem to move very much. I saw what looked like breathing movements, and just small movements in general. I texted my mom because I figured I can't make a phone call to the police. The intruder will hear me. She said I better not be playing, but that she already called the cops. It felt like an eternity. We waited, keeping an eye on the figure, but again, no crazy quick movements, just watching us. I would squeeze my significant other's leg when I thought it would be moving. We hear a loud knocking at our door. It was the cops at that point. My significant other leapt out of the bed and ran for the door. The cops looked around and then started questioning us. There was no figure in the doorway now. Come to find out, the figure was something called the Hat Man. I only discovered this recently, as I thought it was sleep paralysis or something. But watching a YouTube video about entities and ghosts, I heard someone being watched by the same shadowy figure in the same way. The second encounter was posted by user Spicy Slopper801. My father and an uncle have a history of living as outsiders, non-native or Caucasian, young people on the reservation. Their tale of experiencing a skinwalker. My grandma taught school on the reservation, and they lived well off compared to the natives living there. From what I know, there's a lot of lore surrounding the Navajo Nation. Non-natives, primarily older generations, keeping their experiences and stories left unspoken, especially to those not from the culture. Forgive me if I'm mistaken in any of this, the culture, ideology, practices, or any other part. I'm just trying to tell this story my family has only spoken to me in whispers. My grandmother, father, and uncle lived there for a few years, and their experience was much different than the Navajo people who have lived there for generations upon generations. I just want to tell their story and get insight as to anyone else who has lived in that community and any other story some people might be willing to share. My father and uncle are about 2 years apart in age. They lived in Navajo Mountain in the 1980s. My dad was 10 to 12 years old, and my uncle was a bit younger. As it goes, they were always outside riding bikes with their friends, natives of the reservation. My grandma was recovering from an abusive relationship with their father and wasn't too concerned with their whereabouts, being it was a small community. There wasn't much trouble around, nor would they know what real trouble was at that age. Trouble wasn't the issue to young white boys on a reservation then. Pure terror, however, was. It was a typical night without any parental supervision. The night was colder than usual, and the night sky was blacker than you could imagine. In such a desolate place, the stars in the sky would light the night. This night was as if the earth had moved to a different dimension, an abyss. The boys raced each other, as they did every night, until they were compelled to force their brakes in unison. They simultaneously looked up. Each boy's face melted from carefree, innocent, and adolescent to unadulterated horror. The boys stood motionless, grasping their bikes with every nerve, muscle, and strength in their body on the dirt road. To the right of them was a mesa, one they rode by every day, the mesa that paralleled from my family's home. The mesa that they could see through my father and uncle's bedroom every night. This mesa would become fear and nightmares to them from this night forward. At the top of the mesa was a roaring fire, taller than any bonfire that someone could assemble, bigger than a group of people could assemble. It raged and was unbelievable. It was almost as tall as the mesa itself. More unbelievable was the pitch-black figure seen cavorting around the bonfire. The native boys with my father and uncle informed them that this was not a typical Navajo dance or ritual. Pits began to form in their stomachs. Friends of my father and uncle turned back around without a word and bolted back to their homes. My father and uncle threw their bikes to the ground and ran across the unpaved road into their home. The two came back in a panic, relaying what they'd just seen to my grandmother, but she was unconcerned. A legend of the natives, she told them, and shooed them away. They laid awake all night in their shared room, not saying a word to another. They forced their curtains as close as possible, too scared to look out of the window and see what they shouldn't have to begin with. Neither could shake the images burnt into their memory, but the sun managed to rise and peeked into their room. A sense of release washed over them as the darkness had faded. The boys left their beds and traveled to the kitchen to try a second time to tell my grandmother what they saw that night. They tried to get a handle on what they saw, but it was as if they couldn't even explain it. Again, my grandmother brushed them off, with a coffee and newspaper more important than their story. She told them to climb the mesa and investigate themselves. The boys wrangled the friends who shared the experience with the night prior as they passed on their bikes. The friends stayed on the dirt road, looking up at the mesa, as my father and uncle climbed up to see any evidence of the hell-burning fire they witnessed together. The mesa wasn't much taller than an average one-story house, so the brothers took less than 2 minutes to climb to the top where the nightmare took place. When they got to the top, they were hysterical and also relieved. There was no indication a bonfire of that enormity or even a fire at all had taken place on the mesa they had clearly seen the night before. They climbed down and told a message to the friends who had also been a part of the shocking scene. Their native friends looked at them in shock, but neither said a word to them. They immediately turned their bikes around and proceeded home. It was never talked about again, despite my father and brother asking about it. My grandmother and everyone else in the community refused to talk about it again. My father is a skeptic. He does not believe in anything paranormal, aliens, ghosts, mermaids, you name it. But whenever I ask about the skinwalker he saw, he turns pale and white. He gets quiet, jumpy, and curt. I had to plead to get the full story out of him, and I could see the goosebumps on every hair standing upon his arms when he shared his experience. My grandma took me to Navajo Mountain in 2019 to show me her history and to see how the Navajo natives still live on this reservation today. According to her, not much has changed since living there in the 80s. I hiked and explored what I could of the reservation, as to not invade or violate any of the Navajo reservation and its beauty. However, I did feel a change in mood when I visited. My existence felt heavy, as if it wasn't supposed to be there, or if I was invading on territory that wasn't meant for me. Not caused by any of the community there, but just by my presence being on the land. I will never forget my experience visiting and all that I learned about the reservation life. I climbed the mesa where the skinwalker my dad and uncle claimed had its ritual. I felt pretty normal until I got to the top and stood in the middle. I felt some darkness creep into me as I stood there. I've never been the same ever since. The third story has been posted by user Lisette Bay. Let me start off by saying, I used to be friends with the man I am about to talk about, until one day he cut me off without explanation. Back in 2016, I met this guy who simply went by Salvatore and was kind of unique. He always wore suits that were colorful and had this strange demeanor about him, an unsettling confidence. He walked and talked like some kind of alien, or just a madman, honestly. But to cut the story short, at first he just seemed unique, and honestly, I was kind of into it. But it soon became really creepy. He would know things he wasn't supposed to. For example, we were walking through the city with a few friends and suddenly he stopped, turned around, and ran down an alley. We chased after him. About 2 sections further down, there was a girl on a bike. He looked at her and said, "She's going to get hurt." Then she looked into our direction and a car hit her. He just walked away and we walked after him. It was weird, but could be explained away as her getting distracted by him. Things got a bit weirder later on, however. In 2019, I said I wanted to visit China and see the Forbidden Palace. He told me not to go. I asked why, and he said, "I don't want you to get stuck because of disease." Literally a few months later, the first case of corona was discovered in Wuhan, China. Things like that kept happening until one day in 2021, he said this to me: "It's almost time for the end. I was confused, so I asked him what he meant. And he turned to me and stared me in the eye, and he said, "We have been preparing for this a long time." I asked him to explain, but he just shook his head. He cut me off in early 2022, and he said, "Our time has passed, but I'll give you one piece of advice. Don't drink alcohol for a while." Found out 2 weeks later I was pregnant. The part that really spooked me is, I swear, sometimes I see him in my dreams. His eyes glowing purple as he observes me. But that could very well be paranoia. So either he's some kind of entity, or one of us, or both of us are crazy. The fourth encounter has been posted by user GetRDoneIdaho. Back in November of 1985, my wife and I were on a deer hunt with my in-laws in the mountains of northwest Montana. It was early afternoon, around 1 p.m. or so. We found a nice draw that looked good and decided to check it out. My wife and mother-in-law headed down an old skid road that went up along the far sides along the creek. My father-in-law went up to the top of the ridge to the east, and I went up to the bottom to the east of the creek. We figured we might push any animals we encountered into each other. The area had been logged several years earlier, and in places you could see up to 150 yards or so, and has a lot of underbush and patches of alder-brush. Where I was, I had a lot of windfalls to work my way through. The road that the girls went down, they said the road was fairly open, but the trees and brush were thick on either side, and they couldn't see very far. The father-in-law was above me on the ridge, and we could catch a glimpse of each other from time to time. We were probably between 150 and 200 yards apart, and 100 feet in elevation different. I was about 1/4 mile from the pickup when I noticed that it's eerily quiet. The only sound was the water trickling in the creek. I had just got to a spot where the ground was getting a lot steeper when I heard a yell. I thought it was my father-in-law, so I yelled back. Then the yell comes again, only louder. I can't understand what was said, so I head towards where he should have been. The yell comes again. I'm thinking he fell and hurt himself or something. I soon find him and say, "What's up?" He said he thought it was me yelling. Then it comes again. He said I'll work my way down to the rig and see if it's the girls. I told him that it doesn't sound like them, but I'll go back down to the creek and see if I can find them. We separate. Now the yelling is becoming pretty regular. I get back down in the bottom, and the yell is echoing all around me. I can't see anything and can't figure out where it's coming from, so I started towards where the girl should have been. Unknown to me, they heard the yell, got scared, and were already at the pickup. I'm working my way down the draw, trying to see what's making these noises. It was almost like a moose call, but different. It was really eerie and would make the hair on your neck stand right up. This continues till I get down to the pickup about 20 minutes later. I walk out of the trees and hears everyone else looking for me. The yelling is still echoing down the draw, and they are trying to figure out what that sound is. They asked me if I had seen what it was. I told them I didn't, but it seemed to be following me down the draw. It was just staying out of sight. I asked if now that we have everyone accounted for, do they want to go see if we can find it? They all said no pretty much at the same time. I told them I don't think it's very far off. Then it all went quiet again. We all started to get ready to go. I'm looking all around, still trying to see anything, when I saw it. I said, "There it is," and all four of us see a big, dark, hairy man type of thing crossing an open ridge several hundred yards above the draw. It was moving at a good pace and crossed an area about 75 to 100 yards in just a few seconds. It was on two legs the entire time and was moving faster than I could run. I always thought that there could be some truth to the Sasquatch story, but now I know of their existence. This was my first sighting. At this point, I have seen these things 3 separate times. The 5th story has been posted by user Skogs Fallen. I grew up on the countryside, right next to a national park, frequently visited by nature lovers and bird enthusiasts. It was the kind of park where you're not really allowed to bike or ride horses, only walk or run. But 10-year-old me felt that it was a stupid rule and did so anyways, because the trails were perfect for it. I knew fully well that I wasn't supposed to do that, and was caught quite a few times, but nothing much came of it apart from half-hearted, "Don't do it again." And of course, I did. Until one day, something frightening happened that made me stop. My family were horse breeders, and I would often take one of the horses for a ride, usually in the Forbidden Park. This day, very early morning, the first day of the summer holiday, it was beautiful outdoors, misty and foggy, yet a sky that promised a sunny day ahead. Since it was so early, before 6 o'clock, I knew there wouldn't be anyone on the trail to see me, so I let the horse set off full speed along the trail. I only slowed down on the part of the trail that got a steep on one side leading down to the river, because the thought of one step too close to the ridge was too much even for a kid with next to non-existing risk assessment skills. Suddenly, the horse came to a halt and refused to take another step. I grew up with horses all my life and knew that usually indicates that you need to investigate. Is there something with the hoofs? Did the horse spot something that spooked it? The hoofs were fine, but the horse didn't move an inch. That's when I saw it. Someone had set up a trap. A thin, sharp metal wire across the trail, in perfect neck height for an adult. I stopped and looked round, but I didn't see anyone. The wire was well attached to 2 trees and impossible for me to remove, so I led the horse around it. And to do so, I had to walk a bit up into the wooded area on the side of the trail. That is when I heard the singing. There is a song called "Hello Santas" in Swedish, and it was that melody, but the lyrics were different and sung in a muffled, snickering voice. Today, I only remember parts of it, but translated, it would have been something like, "Hey, all you runners, come here passing, let the lifeblood pour out." I, as silently as I could, and with my heart in my throat, backed away, got up on the horse, and hurried back the way I came as fast as I could. I knew I had to tell someone about it, but at the same time, wanted to avoid admitting to riding a huge and very forbidden horse on those protected trails, so now I had a problem. The old stories about a madman living in the shed in the woods, a shed that was once a cottage for the local hunter, came back to me as I hung on the horse for dear life. I got home and told my older brother what happened, and he went back there with me and Tao. We found the wire trap, and after a while of searching, we also found a spear-like pole in the ground, right on the spot where you'd land if you came running and jumped over the fallen tree on the trail. That's when we called the police. The area was searched and several similar traps were found, but no sight of the old man. The following summer, though, there were big news in the local paper about spear-like poles being found right under the water's surface, directly under the little tower you're supposed to dive from at the lake. And black garbage bags filled with big rocks were found on the narrow bridge crossing the river. So if a car had hit it, risk is that it would have gone off of the road and into the water. A recurring thought I've had for years now is just how close have I come to the paranormal in my lifetime? That strange noise while camping? Was that just a common animal, or perhaps something more menacing? Or those countless times when I've heard a bump in the middle of the night? The pipes? Maybe a tree branch knocking on a window outside? Or perhaps, yet again, something more mysterious. But either way, I do hope you enjoyed these narrations, and I just wanted to wish you all a very happy Halloween and a good rest of your day.